Kelsey. This is my channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I am wearing one of my fancy booktube hats, and today I'm bringing you a collective book haul for the months of January through March. I haven't thought of myself as buying a lot of books lately, but you know, after 3 months, even if they're pretty terrible 3 months, things have built up, and I have bought a number of things just to sort of treat myself, given that things in my real life have been rough since the beginning of January. But the first things I want to show you are things I received as gifts for whatever reason. So the first book I want to show you today is actually one that has just been self-published. This is Some of My Best Friends Are Human by Liz J. Andersen, who happens to be my aunt. This is a sci-fi coming-of-age story, and my aunt has had 3 short stories at this point published in Analog that followed the same main character, but when she's an adult. So this is sort of a prequel novel to those published stories, although she wrote this first. This is about a girl who's growing up in an orphan center in the Federation of Intelligent Life, which is the, multi-species space society in this world. And it's about how she and several other sort of misfit teens end up in a special training program in planetary ecology, and they have to learn how to be dropped on an alien planet to do a survey. I read a previous draft of this book a couple years ago now, and I really enjoyed it, but I am completely and totally biased because I'm related to the author. I will probably be reaching out to some reviewer friends sometime in the near future to offer review copies, but if anyone is a reviewer and would be interested in a review copy of this book, send me an email or a message on Twitter or something and I'll see what I can do. Now, at the beginning of January, I also had a birthday, and I got a couple of books for my birthday from my Aunt Liz, who wrote this one. And the 2 that she gave me are both SF Masterworks, which I've never had any of these SF Masterworks editions with the yellow spines before. I know people on BookTube really love them, so now I feel like I get to be part of the SF Masterworks BookTube club. I don't know. But the first one that she gave me was this lovely edition of Her Smoke Rose Up Forever by James Tiptree Jr. I've read a few of the stories in this that are available online when this, or at least several stories in this, were group reads for the Lady Vaults book club, which I've been terrible at keeping up with that group on Goodreads since then, but I'll link it down in the description if I remember to. For those who don't know, James Tiptree Jr. was actually a woman named Alice Sheldon writing under a male pseudonym. But I wanted to read the rest of the stories in this collection. I had a copy out from the library, but I had to return it before I got to it. So I'm very excited to have this whole thing. And then the second SF Masterworks book that she gave me was Earth Abides by George R. Stewart. And I think I know a couple people who've read this, and I don't remember much of what they said about it, but I think it's post-apocalyptic, like what happens to these few survivors once the rest of humanity is just gone. So this looks interesting. And then I got one more book gift for my birthday that was from my best friend, and it's a bit of a gag gift. This had come up in some conversation in a joke context, and it's been long enough now and enough things have happened to me that I've forgotten what the inside joke was now, but this is Eloise in Moscow by K. Thompson. This is one of the classic Eloise books, I guess, and I never knew about it. I had the first Eloise book as a kid. I don't think I was ever particularly fond of it. I will tell you, in order to read Eloise in Moscow, I tried to reread Eloise when I was at my parents' house in January, and my attention span at that point was such that I DNF'd Eloise. I forgot to finish it before I left. So I might have to hunt down another copy of Eloise before I can try Eloise in Moscow. But this was just a humorous gift. And now I'm going to go out of chronological order for a bit, because the other books I received as gifts over these last few months were in February. After my mother passed away, I received a lovely, lovely care package from some booktube friends, and it included a lot of goodies and also 2 books. So the people who arranged that and organized that and participated, thank you so, so much. You know who you are. But the 2 books that were in that care package that were sent to me at my dad's house while I was there were 2 of my anticipated 2019 releases. The first was The Haunting of Tramcar 015 by P. Djèlí Clark, and the second was The Raven Tower by Ann Leckie. So the first one, The Haunting of Tramcar 015, is a Tor.com novella set in the same steampunk alternate history Cairo of his previous short story, A Dead Djinn in Cairo, which I really liked. I have already read this, so I will eventually be talking about it in a wrap-up. The Raven Tower I have not yet read, is Ann Leckie's first fantasy novel. This intrigues me immensely. I haven't actually read Ann Leckie's sci-fi. I've been told mixed things about whether people think I personally will like those books. Since military SF usually isn't my thing, I do intend to read them. I own the first one. But I've seen Ann Leckie talk at a number of events now. She seems incredibly smart. I admire her immensely. So I'm looking forward to reading something of hers, and I might read this before I read any of her sci-fi, since this seems more like my thing. Next, I have a couple of used books, just 2. Most of what's in my book hauls is usually used books, and it's not so this time around because I have not been in my normal, like, used book hunting mode. That's just not how my life has been going. But I have 2 used books that I bought at a used bookstore in Seattle. They are both things that I didn't own yet from authors whose works I am collecting. The first is the book of Atrix, Wolfe by Patricia A. McKillip. I've really enjoyed everything I've read by McKillip so far, and I've been hoarding her books. I own way more of them than I have read. But this is a fantasy novel. I don't really know much more about it. It has one of these beautiful wraparound cover illustrations by Kanuko Y. Craft, which I love how many of her books have those. They are some of my favorite book covers. And then the second one is Palimpsest by Catherynne M. Valente. Now, I am a huge fan of Valente's writing, and this is one of the books of hers from her backlist that I still haven't read. I know people who are huge fans of hers who love this book, and also people who are huge fans of hers who actually don't like this book much at all. So this one, despite me being a fan of the author, could go either way. What I gather is that this is about a group of characters who go to this fantastical city, and that, like, the ability to get to this city is sexually transmitted. Next, I have a couple of books that I bought for myself new from indie bookstores. One in Seattle, one in New York. The one that I bought in Seattle is A Cathedral of Myth and Bone by Kat Howard. This is another book that was one of my most anticipated releases of the year. It is another short story collection. I have really liked Kat Howard's short fiction in the past. I believe this is very, very mythic in theme and also centers around mostly female characters. I think I have read one story that's in this before, but I think only one, so I'm looking forward to this a lot. And then the one I bought in New York was The Singing Bone by Shaun, which is a book that I've been wanting to read ever since it was released like a couple years ago. This is basically more of an art book than a reading book. It is a collection of sculptures by Shaun that are all inspired by Grimm's fairy tales. So each page has a photo of the sculpture on one side and like a quote from the fairy tale on the other. And there are like brief summaries of the fairy tales in the back. So I am looking forward to spending some quality time with this at some point. And then I bought 2 books from Barnes & Noble this month with my seasonal spring discount coupons. The first is another short story collection, this one an anthology, and it is New Sons, original speculative fiction by people of color, edited by Nisi Shawl. This is one that should have been in my anticipated releases of 2019 video, but it didn't make it because I screwed screwed up and just didn't mention it when I was filming. But this has a bunch of authors in it that I don't recognize, a few that I do recognize, but I can't think what it is of theirs I've read, if anything, and then a few that I definitely am very excited about. There's a story by Silvia Moreno Garcia in here, and there's a story by Rebecca Roanhoarse. The Rebecca Roanhoarse story that's in this book, I heard her read the first portion of at a reading at Worldcon back in the summer. It intrigued me a lot, and I want to read the rest of it and see how it goes. And then the other book that I got from Barnes & Noble is The Girl from the Other Side, Shularun, Volume 5 by Nagabe. And this is a manga series that I'm really enjoying. I just read Volume 4. There's 6 volumes out right now in English, so there's still one more for me to buy. And I love the art style in this manga series, and at this point the story is, I think, really starting to get interesting. And then the last stack of books I have here are all one book outlet order that I placed because there were a number of things I wanted on Book Outlet, including a couple of the BookTube SFF Award nominees this year that I wanted to read. So that was the impetus for actually placing the order, and then I got several other things at the same time. But the two that are the BookTube SFF Award nominees are The Calculating Stars by Mary Robinette Kowal, which is nominated in science fiction, and Trail of Lightning by Rebecca Roanhoarse, which is nominated in debut novel. Calculating Stars was a March read-along, so I missed that read-along, but the read-along for Trail of Lightning is still upcoming, so hopefully I'll be able to read that with the group. The next book I got is another one by Patricia A. McKillip. This is Kingfisher. This is her most recent book, and a lot of people say it isn't her best, but I still want to read it. Then I have Arabella, the Traitor of Mars by David D. Levine, which is the third and final book in the Adventures of Arabella Ashby trilogy. And I have really enjoyed the first 2 books. I read the first book when it was still very new before the second book came out. I pre-ordered the second book and then took forever to read it. And now that I finished the second book, I need to finish up the trilogy and read the third. Next, I have another anthology because, like, all of the anthologies and story collections are looking really good to me right now. This is 1,000 Beginnings and Endings, edited by Ellen O. and Elise Chapman. This is, as it says up here, 15 retellings of Asian myths and legends. This, I think, was published and marketed as YA, and a number of the authors in here are YA authors, but there are also a couple of authors in here that I don't think of as YA authors, like Aliette de Bodard and Alyssa Wong. And among the authors that I recognize as YA authors in here are like Renee Audier, Roshni Chokshi, Julie Kagawa, and several others. So I'm really interested to see what a collection of these authors would do with Asian myths and legends. I expect not to be familiar with any of the source material, and I expect that reading these stories will make me want to look up and learn more about the stories that they're based on. And then the last book I have here is Ka Dar Oakley in the Ruin of Immer by John Crowley. I don't really understand much of exactly what this book is about, but it seems kind of vast and mythic, and I think it's about, like, a crow and the entirety of human civilization. This was published a couple years ago in 2017, and those who have read it since then seem to think that it is vastly underhyped. So those were the books that I acquired in January through March, which were just weird months of my life. In fact, it was very strange for me just thinking back and looking around and trying to figure out what books I even got in those months. But if you have any thoughts or opinions about any of these, leave me a comment down below. I hope you're having a nice day. That is all. Bye for now.